Life will always put you in situations where power, pride, and politics collide. Nations do it, people do it, and sometimes you do it without even realizing it. But the truth is, what's happening on the global stage is not just about governments, presidents, and prime ministers. It's about principles. When one nation pushes, another pulls. When one threatens, another calculates. And when that pressure comes, you've got to know what's at stake, why it's happening, and what it's really pointing to. Because if you only see the headlines, you'll miss the heartbeat. The U.S. pressuring India. Trump's threat of a 25% tariff. This isn't just economics, it's a power move wrapped in policy. It's about influence, leverage, and the will to control the direction of the game. And when a powerful nation seeks to shape the terms of engagement with another, it will rarely come knocking politely. It will come with tools, tactics, and terms that are designed to create discomfort until compliance looks like the easier path. Tariffs are one of those tools. They are not just taxes on goods, they are strategic weapons in the world of economic diplomacy. When the United States threatens to impose a 25% tariff, it's sending a loud message. We can make it more expensive for your products to reach our market, and in doing so, we can make your industries feel the heat. That threat alone can shift negotiations, alter trade flows, and push leaders to reconsider their positions. This isn't about hostility for hostility's sake, it's about leverage. In a global marketplace, access to the U.S. consumer base is a prize every nation values. The sheer size of the American market means that losing favorable access can hurt exports, damage growth, and ripple through industries. The threat of higher tariffs puts a cost on standing firm, forcing the other side to decide how much they're willing to pay to keep their stand. It's like a chess match where the U.S. moves a piece that corners the opponent's queen, not to take it immediately, but to make them think twice about their next move. Such actions are also about perception. A president who takes a tough stance in international trade wants the world to see strength, resilience, and an unwillingness to be taken advantage of. This posture isn't just for the negotiating table, it's for domestic audiences too. It sends a signal to voters, industries, and political allies that the leadership is defending national interests with vigor. And in the high-stakes environment of political optics, the appearance of power can be just as valuable as power itself. The imposition or threat of tariffs often comes with a list of demands, whether explicit or implied. It may involve reducing the trade deficit, increasing market access for U.S. goods, or curbing practices perceived as unfair, such as subsidies or restrictions on foreign companies. By tying these demands to economic penalties, the U.S. makes the conversation about immediate consequences rather than distant ideals. This shifts the psychological advantage, making the other party more inclined to negotiate under pressure rather than principle. But the use of tariffs as leverage is not without risk. It can provoke retaliation where the targeted country responds with its own tariffs on American goods. This can escalate into a trade war with both sides suffering economic losses. Yet, in the calculus of high-level negotiation, the initial threat is often about avoiding escalation by securing concessions early. The idea is to create enough discomfort to prevent a prolonged conflict, leveraging short-term pain for long-term gain. The historical precedent for such tactics runs deep. Throughout modern history, economic measures have been wielded to enforce political will, from embargoes to sanctions to trade agreements structured in favor of the initiator. The difference here is the scale. When the U.S. acts, the ripple effects are global. Markets respond, investors watch closely, and other nations adjust their strategies based on the signals being sent. In this way, the tariff threat becomes a tool not just for one bilateral relationship, but for shaping the broader global trade environment. Behind the numbers and percentages lies a deeper truth about power dynamics. In international relations, economics and politics are inseparable. Every trade policy carries with it a strategic implication. The U.S. knows that by adjusting the flow of goods, it can influence political alignments, secure commitments, and reinforce its role as a dominant player in global affairs. The terror threat is a reminder that in this arena, economic pressure is as potent as military might in securing national objectives. India's place in the global economy is not a matter of chance. It is the result of decades of positioning, development, and strategic alignment. It stands at the intersection of multiple economic corridors, with its influence stretching from Asia to Africa and into Western markets. As one of the fastest growing major economies, it offers both a massive consumer base and a production hub that attracts global investment. This dual role makes it indispensable to many international supply chains, from technology to textiles, from pharmaceuticals to agriculture. When a country reaches this level of strategic importance, it becomes more than just a trading partner. It becomes a gatekeeper for certain industries and a bridge for others seeking market expansion. Its geographic location amplifies this influence. Situated between the energy-rich Middle East and the manufacturing powerhouses of East Asia, India commands shipping lanes and logistical routes that are critical to global trade. This makes its cooperation valuable not just to the United States, but also to China, the European Union, and emerging African markets. Any shift in India's trade policies or its alignment with global powers can create ripple effects across continents. For this reason, when the U.S. exerts pressure, it's not simply addressing one country. It's attempting to shape the decisions of a nation whose choices affect a significant portion of the global economic network. India's economic policies also reflect a balancing act between openness and self-reliance. On one hand, it has embraced foreign investment in key sectors, inviting multinational corporations to set up operations and tap into its workforce. On the other, it has maintained protective measures to support domestic industries, shielding them from foreign competition where it sees national interest at stake. This blend of openness and caution makes it a complex partner to negotiate with, because concessions in one area might be offset by firm resistance in another. For the U.S., this means any attempt to influence India's trade posture has to take into account its deep-rooted priority of preserving sovereignty over economic decisions. Another aspect of India's strategic position is its role in the technological and digital economy. As a global leader in IT services, software exports, and a rapidly expanding startup ecosystem, India is shaping the future of digital trade, intellectual property rules, and data governance. Control or partnership in these domains is as critical as traditional goods trade, because the next era of global competition will be fought as much in cyberspace as in shipping ports. This makes India a highly desirable partner for nations seeking both economic growth and technological leadership. Furthermore, India's demographic advantage cannot be ignored. With a young, growing population, it offers a labor force capable of driving industrial growth for decades to come. This contrasts with many developed nations facing aging populations and shrinking workforces. For the U.S., aligning with such a demographic powerhouse could mean securing long-term production capabilities, innovation potential, and a market that will continue to expand even as others plateau. India's relationships with other major powers also defines its leverage. Its membership in groups like BRICS, the Quad, and various regional trade forums allows it to play multiple sides of the global chessboard, extracting benefits from all without committing fully to any one bloc. This flexibility strengthens its bargaining power, as it can shift alliances or economic commitments to match its strategic needs. For the U.S., this means that any attempt to pressure India through tariffs or trade restrictions must account for the fact that India has alternatives. Other powerful nations eager to deepen ties if the U.S. relationship cools. The combination of market size, geographic importance, policy autonomy, technological leadership, demographic strength, and diplomatic flexibility places India in a rare category of nations that cannot easily be sidelined. This is why the stakes are so high. When the U.S. applies economic pressure, the response will not only shape bilateral trade, but could influence the balance of power in the wider global economy. India's strategic position in the global economy is built on more than just numbers. It's built on reach, influence, and the ability to affect multiple markets at once. It is one of the few nations that is both a major consumer and a major producer, giving it a unique dual power in trade negotiations. On one side, the sheer size of its domestic market attracts nations eager to sell goods and services to hundreds of millions of potential buyers. On the other, its manufacturing base, agricultural output, and technological services make it a source of products and innovations the world relies on. This combination creates a leverage point few nations can claim, making India not just a participant in the global economy, but a pivotal player in shaping its direction. Its geographic placement further boosts this influence. Positioned between vital energy suppliers in the Middle East and industrial giants in East Asia, India sits along trade routes that are essential to global commerce. Control, access, or cooperation in these corridors can significantly impact shipping times, costs, and security for goods moving across continents. For the United States, this geographic advantage means that maintaining a positive and cooperative relationship with India is not simply about trade. It's about securing a reliable partner in a region where strategic positioning is everything. The economic policies of India add yet another layer to its significance. While it has opened its doors to foreign investment and encouraged global corporations to establish a presence, it has also maintained protective measures to safeguard local industries. This balance between openness and self-preservation means that India is not easily swayed into agreements that compromise its long-term sovereignty. Negotiating with such a nation requires understanding that its priorities are not purely economic. They are also political, cultural, and deeply tied to its vision of self-reliance. India's rise as a technology and innovation hub amplifies its global economic weight. It has become a leader in IT services, software development, and a growing startup ecosystem, influencing how digital trade, cybersecurity, and intellectual property are approached worldwide. In an era where economic competition is as much about data and algorithms as it is about steel and textiles, India's role in the digital economy makes it an indispensable partner or rival in shaping the future of commerce. The demographic factor cannot be overlooked. With one of the youngest populations in the world, India holds a long-term workforce advantage that many developed countries have already lost. This not only fuels its own industrial growth, but also offers global partners a sustained source of talent and innovation. As nations with aging populations struggle to maintain productivity, India's youth-driven economy becomes a strategic asset in global labor markets. Diplomatically, India's involvement in multiple international alliances and trade groups allows it to navigate global politics with flexibility. It can collaborate with Western powers through forums like the Quad, while simultaneously engaging with emerging economies via BRICS. This adaptability enhances its bargaining power, as it can pivot toward different partners depending on who offers the most favorable terms. For the U.S., this means that any attempt to apply economic pressure must be calculated carefully, because India has the ability and the willingness to seek alternative alliances if relations sour. of these factors combine to make India a nation that cannot be easily pressured without consequence. Its economic size, strategic location, technological capabilities, demographic advantages, and diplomatic agility ensure that its decisions reverberate far beyond its own borders. Balancing trade deficits and domestic manufacturing goals is at the heart of many high-stakes economic negotiations. For a country like the United States, a trade deficit represents more than just a gap between imports and exports. It becomes a symbol of economic vulnerability and lost opportunity for local industries. When imports consistently outweigh exports, it can fuel political narratives about jobs being shipped overseas, industries declining, and foreign competitors gaining the upper hand. This is why leaders often frame trade actions, such as tariffs, as necessary measures to protect national interests and restore balance in the flow of goods. At the core of this strategy is the desire to create an environment where domestic production is competitive and sustainable. By making imported goods more expensive through tariffs, the aim is to encourage consumers and businesses to turn to locally made alternatives. This not only supports local manufacturers, but also keeps money circulating within the domestic economy, strengthening industries that are seen as vital for national growth and security. In the U.S., this is often linked to key sectors like steel, technology, automotive, and agriculture, industries that carry both economic and political weight. However, the balancing act is more complex than simply raising import costs. A sudden increase in tariffs can also raise prices for consumers, especially when there are no equivalent local products to replace the imports. This can lead to inflationary pressure and discontent among voters, undermining the very political support such measures are meant to bolster. As a result, tariff threats are often used as bargaining chips rather than permanent solutions, creating just enough uncertainty to push the other nation toward concessions without locking domestic markets into long-term higher prices. From the perspective of domestic manufacturing, these moves are not just about immediate gains, they are about protecting future capacity. If foreign competition continues unchecked, local producers may be forced out of business, losing not only current jobs, but also the infrastructure and expertise needed to compete in the future. Once a manufacturing base is dismantled, rebuilding it becomes costly and time-consuming. Leaders who advocate for aggressive trade measures argue that it's better to act now, even if it causes short-term friction, than to face irreversible decline later. The challenge, however, lies in the interconnected nature of modern supply chains. Many U.S. manufacturers rely on imported components and raw materials, meaning that tariffs can also increase their production costs. This creates a paradox where protecting one sector may inadvertently harm another. Navigating this requires careful calibration of which goods are targeted, how tariffs are structured, and what exemptions are granted to avoid unnecessary collateral damage. When such strategies are aimed at a country like India, the calculation becomes even more layered. India's competitive industries such as textiles, pharmaceuticals, and IT services are deeply integrated into global markets, and its leaders are equally committed to protecting their domestic growth. This means that any attempt to address trade imbalances through pressure must account for the fact that India is also pursuing its own version of this same balancing act. While the U.S. seeks to reduce its deficit and boost local production, India seeks to expand its exports and secure better access to foreign markets, creating a natural point of tension. Except in the case of all, this tug-of-war often plays out in rounds of negotiations where each side weighs the economic cost of holding firm against the political cost of making concessions. Tariffs become one of the most visible and impactful tools in this process, but they are rarely the whole story. Behind the scenes, both nations may be exploring other ways to achieve their domestic manufacturing goals, from incentivizing investment to adjusting regulatory frameworks, while still maintaining enough cooperation to keep broader economic ties intact. Impact on diplomatic relations between the two nations goes far beyond the formalities of press conferences and joint statements. It reaches into the subtle calculations that define trust, cooperation, and long-term partnership. When economic pressure is applied, especially in the form of tariffs or public threats, it inevitably sends a message that resonates beyond trade. It says that the relationship is not immune to confrontation and that one side is willing to apply force to secure its interests. This shift in tone can ripple through every other area of engagement, from defense cooperation to cultural exchange. For nations like the U.S. and India, whose partnerships span strategic, economic, and security dimensions, such moments test the resilience of the relationship. While both may publicly affirm their commitment to mutual goals, private diplomatic channels can become strained as negotiators weigh whether concessions will strengthen the partnership or signal weakness. In some cases, pressure can lead to more intense collaboration if both sides recognize the mutual benefit of compromise. In others, it can create a lingering sense of mistrust that slows future cooperation. Economic disputes often bleed into areas where cooperation had previously been smooth. For example, joint defense initiatives, counterterrorism efforts, and shared infrastructure projects can experience delays or reduced enthusiasm if one side feels cornered in trade negotiations. This isn't always the result of formal retaliation. It can simply be the byproduct of diminished goodwill. Nations, like individuals, tend to bring the tone of one part of a relationship into others, whether intentionally or not. The diplomatic impact is also shaped by the public narrative. When leaders take strong public stances, whether it's the U.S. president threatening steep tariffs or Indian officials vowing to stand firm, those statements create political expectations at home. Backing down too visibly can be seen as a loss of face, which in the realm of international relations is often as damaging as a tangible economic concession. This means negotiators must navigate not only the substance of the trade dispute, but also the optics, ensuring that any resolution can be presented as a win to domestic audiences. For a country like India, which values its image as an independent and sovereign actor on the world stage, the manner in which the U.S. applies pressure matters as much as the demands themselves. Heavy-handed tactics can push India to seek stronger ties with other major powers, using alternative partnerships to reduce dependence on American markets or political goodwill. This is where economic disputes can have strategic consequences, potentially altering alliances and long-term geopolitical alignments. Given at the same time, the depth of the U.S. India relationship provides a buffer that allows both sides to withstand periods of tension. Shared interest in regional stability, countering terrorism, and balancing the influence of other global powers, especially China, often keep the partnership from fracturing completely. Yet, even when the relationship remains intact, moments of economic confrontation leave their mark, shaping the tone and trajectory of future diplomacy. Every terror threat, every countermeasure becomes part of the memory of the relationship, influencing how each side approaches the next challenge. Domestic political motives behind tariff threats are often as influential as the economic reasoning that justifies them. Leaders do not operate in a vacuum. They are constantly aware of how their actions will be perceived by voters, political allies, and opponents. A strong stance on trade, especially when framed as protecting national industries and jobs, can resonate deeply with segments of the electorate who feel left behind by globalization. In this way, a tariff threat becomes not only a negotiating tool in international trade, but also a message to domestic audiences that leadership is willing to take bold action in defense of their economic interests. For the U.S., this kind of rhetoric often plays particularly well in states and regions heavily dependent on manufacturing, agriculture, or other industries sensitive to foreign competition. By threatening tariffs, a leader can position themselves as a defender of local livelihoods, even if the actual economic impact is more complex. These moves can generate political capital by appearing to challenge foreign nations, seen as benefiting disproportionately from trade agreements or existing market conditions. The political payoff is immediate, even if the economic outcomes take months or years to materialize. This strategy also serves as a demonstration of strength, projecting an image of decisiveness and control. In political narratives, being perceived as tough on foreign trade partners can overshadow nuanced policy debates because strength plays well in headlines. A leader who can stand before the public and declare they will not allow another nation to take advantage of their country sends a clear, emotionally charged signal that can energize supporters and shift media focus in their favor. However, political motives can also complicate the path to resolution. Once a leader has made strong public commitments tied to tariff threats, backing down without securing visible concessions risks being seen as weak or ineffective. This dynamic can prolong disputes, as leaders may prioritize protecting their political image over quickly reaching a compromise. The negotiation process then becomes as much about crafting a politically acceptable outcome as it is about achieving economic balance. In the case of a U.S. India tariff dispute, both sides have their own domestic political landscapes to consider. Indian leaders, too, must show their citizens that they will not be bullied into unfavorable terms. This mutual need to project strength can create a standoff where symbolic gestures carry as much weight as actual policy changes. Each government must carefully calibrate its actions and words to satisfy internal audiences while still leaving room for diplomatic flexibility. The timing of such threats often aligns with election cycles, key legislative battles, or moments when public attention on economic issues is high. In these periods, trade disputes can be spotlighted as proof of a leader's commitment to national prosperity. Even if the economic results are uncertain, the political benefit of appearing proactive can be significant. Thus, while tariffs and trade measures may be explained in terms of deficits, market access, or industry protection, the underlying driver is frequently the political advantage they offer in the domestic arena.